Let's talk about Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, this will have spoilers, of course, because I'm just kind of free reflecting. I don't want to call this a reaction video, because I'd like to think I gave it more than 2 or 3 seconds of thought. So this morning I woke up at an ungodly hour and couldn't go back to sleep. And I kind of resisted for a while. And I thought, hey, it's Friday morning. Great chance to go ahead and watch the new Marvel show. So I threw it on before the sun came up and watched the first episode. And I'm really interested in what they're doing with these shows, how they're telling longer format, more nuanced stories that are about a whole lot more than kind of the big, impressive explosions and all that, big action pieces. And what I walked away with is that if WandaVision is primarily about grief, and of course trauma, but really any story about these characters will involve a lot of trauma. But if it's about grief, and about the way that grief can cause us to lash out, to hide, to hurt ourselves and others, and the need to reintegrate who we are and to find agency in our lives and all of those themes, then what it looks like this show is going to be about responsibility, regret. It ultimately feels like it's a show about guilt. We see this most obviously in the case of Bucky Barnes. With Sam, they've done a really interesting thing. We've seen him so far as the helper, the support person, the one who's always got Cap's back, who's always there in a pinch when needed, but ultimately always playing support. Now, Implicitly Pretentious has a great video about this, and I'll include that in the title card at the end. What I love is they've introduced his family. And this is a thing we've not really seen much of in the MCU. We've seen, individual relationships, and we've seen a couple of nuclear families in terms of Hawkeye and also in terms of Ant-Man. But we haven't seen brothers and sisters, let alone extended families. And the idea that, wow, Sam's been great. He took off, he left his job, he went around saving the world. He spent years on the run because he was doing the right thing and supporting Captain America and all of that. And then the idea that he had responsibilities at home that he wasn't attending to, that he wasn't looking after, that his sister has been struggling, really not just for the 5 years he's been gone in the blip, but really for years before then, because he hasn't been around. Probably hasn't been around for a decade. And what that absence has done to his family. Even though he acts like he's still fully integrated, and he's clearly loved. I mean, it isn't like he's estranged from his family, he just hasn't been there. So he's got that to deal with. He's been gone for 5 years, he was gone for years before that. He pretty much picked up and vanished to pursue a good calling, a noble calling, a higher calling, but nevertheless one that left the ones he loved in the lurch. And then, of course, the more obvious one, Bucky. Now, Bucky's interesting to me because he was blipped for 5 years. It's not going to impact him the same way as everyone else because he's been essentially blipped out for decades at a time. Like Steve Rogers, he's a man out of time, and I like how they're kind of playing with that aspect of him. He's still a 1940s man trapped in the 21st century. A little darker than Steve, but still holding a very 1940s way of viewing the world. But he lost so much time that being gone for 5 years is just like being back in cryo for a while. So that's not his issue. His issue is the things that he did. The things he did while under Hydra's control. And the guilt that comes with that. And I love the fact that he's in therapy. That's phenomenal and fantastic. And not just any therapy, but also a military therapist to deal with his particular issues. But also he's trying to make amends. which kind of reminds me of a 12-step program. Trying to heal relationships or make amends for the wrongs that you've done while under the influence. In his case, the influence of mind control with Hydra versus the influence of alcohol or other substances. And the first thing we see him do, which is the last one on his list, is in some ways the easiest. Turning over Hydra operatives, Hydra leaders, who have not yet been outed and caught, to the US government, or Interpol, or whoever it was he was working for. Doesn't kill anybody, he's trying to be a better person, but ultimately, very much in his skill set. But the other case, trying to make amends for someone that he killed who wasn't even a target, somebody who just saw too much, a truly innocent civilian. He befriends this victim's father, brings him companionship, friendship, a little support, encouragement, much as he can offer. But he can't tell this man the truth. That is a harder task, to be completely honest, to be completely straightforward, to reveal the monster within you, the monster that you have been. The kind of courage that takes is so much harder than facing down an obvious bad guy. And this is just where we're starting. With WandaVision, we really dealt with the deep impact of grief towards the end of the show. The beginning was much more about setting the tone, setting the weirdness, setting up the stage. Here we're diving right into the emotional issues, and I find that fascinating. We have an action piece early on, which is great. It's fun. It's super. It's, again, Sam gets to be a badass, and Sam can defeat international terrorists. I love the return of Bartok the Leaper, but he can't get alone. Bucky can also bring in international terrorists, but he can't tell a man what happened to his son, let alone owning up his role in it. These are both men who want to be something that they're not yet. In Sam's case, this is probably going to be him eventually owning up to that shield and becoming the Captain America the world needs, because we all know that U.S. agent is not going to be what the world needs right now. I'm also really fascinated by bringing in Flag Smasher. We know Zemo's part of this. That's been in the commercials, and I thought it was some version of the hand because of, well, obviously the red hand. But the idea that no, this is not just Flag Smasher, but that he has started an international movement to basically end government, to bring around like a one world system, very idealistic, very ideal, and in many ways very appealing. And you can see why folks would go in, like, yes, let's tear down the borders, let's all become one people, let's all become one again, let's not be so divided, there's an intergalactic threat out there. It isn't nation against nation, it's the world against the universe. Absolutely, it makes perfect sense. Who wouldn't want to join up with that? But clearly, there's going to be a lot darker stuff going on there. So we've got three potential big bads. We've got Zemo, with his line in the trailer about superheroes cannot be allowed. We've got Flag Smasher, leading a populist movement worldwide. And then we've got U.S. Agent, who in the comics is kind of a hero, but generally a douchebag. Not really even an anti-hero, more like somebody who's just so jingoistic and so blind to anything but his very kind of super macho, white heterosexual, toxic masculinity, that he's really a problem, even though he does technically fight on the side of the good guys. I'm looking forward to see where this goes. I don't know it's going to have the same kind of internet, what does it mean kind of weirdness that WandaVision brought, and that's fine. Not every show should be WandaVision. But it leads me to think a lot about guilt, choices that I've made that have hurt myself, hurt others, ways in which I have avoided becoming the man that I could have been and could still be. Not owning my power, not owning my worthiness, as well as not owning my mistakes. So, yeah, those are my reflections more than reactions. Now, this is the first video I've done, really kind of like this on YouTube. I will probably keep doing it. I don't really know for sure. I used to blog back before there was a term for it, back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, when it was just online journaling. And I'm sure it'll get more hi-fi at some point. Right now I'm just using my iPhone. But one of the things I want to do to start becoming more myself is to take a little break before my day starts and think about whatever I'm consuming, or thinking about whether it be news, whether it be pop culture, whether it be music, books, TV, whatever. Just what's kind of going into my brain and what's making me think about, and try to think about what I'm consuming and what it means. Because every story, of course, has a meaning. Every story has a point. We can't help but put points to our stories because they reflect our worldview. So, I hope you found this interesting. Hope it gave you as much pause to thought as it gave me, or pause to think perhaps. I will try to keep these largely unedited, although I do have a bit of a stammer, so if I completely blow a word or here or there, I might go back and fix that. But generally speaking, those will be one-take shots. So that's that. Thanks for joining me if you've watched this, and like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. But a comment down below. Let me know if you think I'm totally off base, or if this sparked a thought in you. I'd like to know. See you around.